Greetings all, Ferrari-Man 601 here. You're looking at a very dirty Mattel 2002 Ferrari Enzo. Now, what are we doing here today? Well, we're going to talk about how you clean a model car. Yes, this is a very old one that I've got. Again, it's a model of a 2002 model year car, and I've had it since, I want to say 2003, 2004, somewhere around there. I know that I've had this one since before I moved into my most recent house, and before we had these little invaders as well. So, yes, so we moved into this house in 2005. Dude, don't, please don't. But yes, anyway, we're going to talk about how you clean a model car. We've got some simple tools here, and we have some assistance. It would appear to be, yeah. Anyway, let's go through how you do this, how you avoid damaging things, and most importantly, what to look out for, and just generally speaking, is this bad? I mean, you can see this thing is amazingly dusty because it just hasn't been touched in probably 10 years or so. But yeah, we'll go through how to clean this thing, what to look out for, and all of that. So stand by, and we're going to get some feline intervention apparently. So generally speaking, these are the tools of the trade. I have, this is just a normal type of furniture polish. There's nothing special about it. It's made for wood surfaces, really, sealed wood surfaces, but it'll work on metal. It'll work on paint as well. Be careful about thin plastic sections or the transparent areas. I mean, it'll work, but I don't know if you'd want to make a habit of using something like this because generally speaking, like dissolves like, so if you've got petroleum-based paints and petroleum-based materials like plastics, it could do some more harm than good in later years. But you'll see why this probably doesn't matter all that much in the end. Also, you're going to want a pair of gloves. I just have these driving gloves here because it's the only gloves I have at the moment, but any glove will do, really. Ideally, something that's not going to leave marks on the finished surface, so ideally you'd want a latex rubber glove, but that'll do. And then just a microfiber cloth, in addition to a soft-tipped brush. So this is, really it's a makeup brush, but this actually comes from a model cleaning kit that I got many years ago. The rest of the kit's long gone, but the brush remains, and it's the same as any sort of makeup brush that I suppose some of the more feminine inclined among us may do things with that I don't quite understand. But yes, that's probably the most important thing for the first step of the cleaning process, which is quite obviously to get all this dust off. Now, there are two ways you could go about doing this. One, you could just quite obviously just brush the thing off, but you're going to get dust everywhere if you do that. So what I tend to do is I tend to wet this just so that we can control some of the dust and just really get a better job of getting some of this stuff off. As you can see, there are a lot of different open areas on this car as well as little ducts and louvers all over the place, so we've got ourselves some work cut out for us. So just generally speaking, obviously the first part of this job is to get this dust off. So I've got the wet brush here, and all I'm going to do with it is just start to glob some water on this thing, and obviously as we apply the water we're also going to be getting some of that dust off, and you can already see why I've wet this. You can see the dust just starting to roll up rather than get thrown all over. So that's what you want. You want to start to actually collect this stuff rather than just push it around, and if you were to do this dry, you wouldn't have it globbing up like that, so it would just go from one place and get pushed somewhere else. So really, that's why I find it advantageous to wet the thing. Obviously, for these particularly dusty sections, the engine cover here on the rear is particularly bad, so I'm going to have to apply this again, get this wet again, and then go back to it in a second pass. But already you can see all this grossness that's been on this thing. Yeah, and it's pretty stark. Come over to this side, and you can just see the difference visually. Just obviously you can see the part that I've hit and the part that I haven't, and there's quite a change in the color value there. So we've got ourselves quite a bit of accumulated dust and dirt and garbage on this thing, which of course is nowhere near ideal for what you want. So obviously a lot of improvement can be had. We'll just continue to do as we were before. I want to get some more water along the windshield here, as well as on the door on my side that you can't see, and on the engine cover as well. Again, just initially trying to get all this stuff agitated and picked up. And what's good about these really fine brushes is they tend to hold on to the dust, as you can see there. So when they're wet, they hold on to the stuff quite well, and it does lift it off of the surface. You don't want to be too aggressive, particularly on the thinner and transparent plastic sections, because that'll really scratch up and you'll never get that clear because they're so thin. If you wanted to try and polish that surface, all you're going to do is break through it. So that's one of the better things that you've got. Another thing that's probably advantageous to have right now that I don't have at the moment, and I'm going to grab, just some paper towels, just, you know, to dry the brush off, get some of the dust off of it, and all of that. Also, what you could do, kind of like if you were going to paint with really anything, but watercolor in particular, you'd want some sort of a water dish, a little cup, just so you could wash this off a little bit more conveniently rather than running back and forth to the sink like I'm doing. But again, it's the same general philosophy applies. And yes, because this car is particularly dirty, we're doing multiple passes here with the water again, because this dust, it's loose and it just sits on top of the paint. But if there happens to be any sort of residue on it from maybe where you've handled it, if you have old fingerprints on here, or if anything were ever spilled on it, or old cleaning products even, it could create a little bit of a filmy residue that could be a little sticky, and the dust will really get caked in there. So you want to make sure that you get into all of the major areas that you can just easily access. Again, you don't want to be using a whole lot of force, and remember that you have different materials all cohabitating here. So on the die-cast metal, I know that I can use a little bit more pressure if I need to get into somewhere, but on the plastic I really want to be careful because that's liable to bend and crack and break, so I don't want to really be dealing with anything in there if I don't have to. And of course this is all just the exterior still. I think for the most part we are looking all right. So that's not too bad, and again, it's just water on this. You're not going to hurt anything. Obviously, if you had any sort of oil-based whatever, and in particular water slide decals may be susceptible to damage from water. You may reactivate the little adhesive that's in those, so you might want to be careful with that. But this model has a clear coat over it, and it's not going to be really impacted by this, so I'm not going to worry about that all that much. And again, just making sure we get the big dust globules off of this. So I'm just going to do one more quick pass with the wet brush across the whole car really quickly, just to make sure that we've gotten the majority of the dust off out of the big areas that we can reach. And then, like so, just going to sort of smear the water around. You don't have to worry about making a mess or anything, because the next step in all of this is going to be quite simply to dry the thing off, and we're also going to dry the brush off. But dry the car first, and here's where you want the paper towels. So you don't want to use a lot of force, nor do you really want to rub or scour, because particularly if you do have an older model, and remember we're dealing with different materials here in the same space, so if perchance the water has done anything to decals, or if it's even gotten into the paint layer a little bit, you don't want to rub anything, because if you have sort of softened anything, the decals in particular, this is going to just rip them right off and you're never going to get them back on. So you want to be very careful with this part, but again, we're just sort of blotting it dry with the paper towel. Paper towel is also a little bit abrasive, so you just don't want to be using a lot of force or scrubbing with this. That's what the microfiber is for later on. So just to get it reasonably dry, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just so that you can't see any major water spots on a car. And also here, I'll show you this in some more detail. You can see the left headlight here. The ceiling on here is obviously not meant to be watertight, so we've got a little bit of water inside that, but that's okay. That'll just evaporate from whence it came, and it'll be fine. You can also see we've got some dust in this area, or is that a little bit of paint loss? That's probably dust, if I had to guess. Yeah, it's dust. Okay, so that's fine. Let's get that back in there, and you can see that's now gone. But yeah, just little bits of water will get into some of these spots, and it's no big deal. Again, it will just sort of evaporate, and everything will be fine once again. So continue to dry off. We wet it a little bit again when we put our brush back in, but that is okay. No problems. And then we're pretty good to go. You can see just from doing that, just from getting the dust off of it, the car looks a whole lot better. I mean, remember what it looked like just a couple of minutes ago? Obviously, we're going to have water spots in the paint. That's just something that's going to happen, but you can see that the color is now once again red and not some sort of weird tannish beige disgusting thing. Some of the transparent surfaces look a little bit bad, and we haven't even begun to touch the interior yet, which I can assure you needs some work. And it's a little bit difficult to maneuver the lighting. But yeah, the interior is quite dusty, and we're going to be getting in there. No worries, but that's a little bit more intricate, but we'll get there. Now, taking a look at the rear of the car, you can see that we've missed a spot. Yep, lots of dust there on the rear fascia where the mesh is, and the rear bumper and the diffuser area. So we're just going to get in there, and we're going to just very generally try to get as much dust out of the exhausts as we can get, as well as out of the diffuser strakes in here. There we are. And again, that looks pretty well okay. Just trying to get the dust out of it at this point. And again, you can come back in with the paper towel and just sort of blot it a little bit. If you are going to swipe across it, don't really use any pressure. Just let gravity do that. Just guide it along. And it's just trying to dry it. We're not trying to buff anything or whatever at this point. But also, we haven't looked inside the car really yet. The first major area we can access is the engine. So this cover is all plastic. We just lift up and it comes open like so. Now, this seals up pretty well, so this actually doesn't look all that bad in here. You can see we do have some surface dust, but that really is just sitting on the surface. We don't have anything in here that's going to cause a problem in terms of getting it out. And you can see here as we get our brush in, it's literally just moving away without any real issue at all. No problems there. This is mostly a plate casting in here. We don't have really separate exhaust primaries or any real plumbing to worry about, so that's not a big deal. If this were a more complicated model, I would not at all recommend putting water in here or even really putting a brush in here. That's something that you might want to use compressed air or one of those difluoroethane, I think it is, those compressed gas canisters that you can get. But here again, just dry it off, and again, there's really not much in here that's going to break, so just going to get in there and clean it all out, no problem. And it's already looking 100% better, and there's really not much else that I want to do in here because you don't see much of it. When you close the engine cover, you just see the intake plenum there, and that's about it. But everything else in here is pretty good. Is there anything of note? I know that, I think it's this one. This wire comes out with a little bit of persuasion. There it is. Just sits in there. It's just something that is an artifact of how this was put together. It's always been that way. Might help a little bit if I had to really get in there and clean something, but it's okay. No reason for me to do anything with that, so I'll just pop that back in its little hole if I can see it, because I'm in shadow here, and yeah, almost might be a two-handed operation, but it goes in there, and again, not really a big detail, and it's certainly not something that you're going to damage, so not at all worried about that. But as I'm using pressure here, you can see the whole engine bay is moving, so it is just a plate casting. It is just its own little part that sits in there. So take that into consideration. If these were all separate elements, like again, if this were something on the order of a CMC or Exoto, no, wouldn't be doing this. We'd be doing something completely different. Now inside the cabin, there is some dust in here, but it's actually not too bad. Obviously the windows don't close, but they enclose enough of the cockpit area that not so much dust has gotten in here. I mean, yeah, there's dust in there, no question about it, and we're going to do something about that, but it's not terrible. And you can see the door sill here still looks pretty good. There's a little bit of dust, but not so much. And again, there's no damage or anything. It's just surface dust, so that's something we could easily deal with. So what we're going to do at this point is we're just going to really do what we did on the outside on the inside. And you're not going to be able to see much of this because I can't hold the camera and do this at the same time because the doors on this model, they don't stay open by themselves. So I've got to prop them up with one hand and then get the brush in with my other. But I'm just going in over the seats, over the center console, up into the dash area as far as I can reach from this side, and then just getting everything wet down. I've wet the brush again, and we're just moving dust out of here and getting it locked into the bristles on this thing. So again, just getting everything sort of spritzed, if you like, and just getting in to clean it up. Obviously we're going to do the same on the other side. Same deal. Again, there's not all that much that you're going to be able to see. But again, same idea, just getting up there along the dashboard, into the footwell, onto the passenger seat, and just getting this stuff out of here. And again, it's really not all that bad in here. I've had worse, believe me, so this is okay. The one area that I can already see I'm going to have a lot of trouble getting to is the very top of the dashboard where the windshield starts to come down, because I just cannot get in there from this angle. I've gotten there a little bit, but it's just not working. Let me show you what I mean here, if I can maneuver my hand around a little bit. There we go. You can see how far up I've gotten my brush into there, and I can't get much farther than this. So that's not something that's going to come easily, but it's going to work. And we're also limited just by the ways that these doors open. They don't open very wide, and they open on an angle, so when we're trying to get in here to get up toward the top of the dashboard and up to the inner part of the windshield, we really don't have much access. So I'm just trying to spin the brush around a little bit to try and get at least half of the bristles up toward the top there and hit something, but it's not working out so nicely. This is where compressed gas really would come in handy, particularly now that everything is wet and you can just sort of blow the stuff in chunks rather than blowing it as a fine powder. So that's not bad, but that's the interior more or less done and dusted, pun intended. And you can see a little bit of what we're doing here now. It's just going to dry out basically by air. Again, you could throw some compressed air in there to help things along if you'd like, but really it's fine. It's black on black, so any water spots that are there will not be noticeable. And yeah. Again, I wish this camera had a light on it, but it doesn't because it's a cheap model and I was cheap when I bought it, but yes. So that's the interior done. The only other part on this model that opens is the front hatch here, where the luggage stowage would be. And there's no luggage in this car. This is the Mattel model, remember. I know that there were a couple other companies that made this that had luggage, but this one doesn't have luggage. What it does have, though, are these two ancient toothpicks. And the reason why they're in here is because the doors don't stay open, so they hold the door open. But as we look in here, you can see that we don't have anything really in here at all. Two little dust spots. And then everything else has stayed pretty well sealed. There's a little bit of dust around the shut line where the windshield matches up with the front end of the chassis, but we'll just sort of brush this out really quickly. And then I think it'll be all right. This also opens up another little method of access for these front ducts, as you can see here. So that's fine. But Yeah, I mean, that's not bad at all. And again, this is just black on black, so things aren't going to show up. It's not reflective at all, it's just matte plastic. So we'll just sort of wipe this down really quick. This is not going to get scratched, so that's fine. And then that's about it. The toothpick solution, in case you're wondering, this is a two-handed operation if I recall. This was something I came up with when I first got this model, but you see the little hinge in here? You just sort of jam the toothpick into the hinge and the door. Remember how I did it. There's a very specific angle that you had to get these in at in order to make this work. And trying to remember what it was. Was it the inside or outside? I think it was the inside, believe it or not. At an angle, and then the toothpick jammed into the hinge and it sort of supported the underside of the door. Like that. That's how we did it. So you can see this very ingenious solution to getting the doors to stay open. There it is. Unfortunately for me, though, this still doesn't really provide too much access in terms of trying to clean this thing, because now I've got a toothpick in the way. So it's not really a solution to this particular problem. But again, you can see how the idea would work, and it worked all right for my purposes. I am gonna use this opportunity to just sort of spritz down the interior surface of the door and the door panel and the little door jambs here along the front end, the A-pillar and the roof. And then I can see a little bit more inside the interior there now. So that looks half decent. And yeah, let's see what's going on. No problems. That's fine. And let's see. Little mirror. Anything else glaring that I can see in there? Not really. See the pedal box down there. And that's about it for the interior, I think. The reversal of the toothpick solution, they just sort of rest inside here, like so. There's a little notch right above the nose tip where you get the two tips of the toothpicks into. And then when you close the hood, it just goes down and you don't even know it's there. So, yes, a little bit of, how old would I have been in 2004? I would have been 12? Yeah, I would have been 12. So 12-year-old Ferrari Man 601 innovation going on right there. Okay, so now this next part is where the ASMR fans are going to have some fun. Here is our polish. It's called Behold, and it is officially marketed as Pulitura para Muebles. Da brillo, limpia y protege. Cool. So, it's furniture polish. It gives brightness or brilliance. It cleans and it protects. So, that means it's cheap, but it's going to be effective. Now, what I've done is I have dried off our brush as best as I can. It's still a little bit damp, but it's okay. It's mostly dry. So now what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to apply some of this furniture polish with the brush. And I'm going to spray the polish directly into the brush, not onto the car, so you can see that there. It's just make sure that we don't have overspray. And all I'm going to start doing here, and this is also where you might want to apply the bespoke RaceQuip gloves. Yeah, bad angles here. But got the gloves applied. I have got some polish on the brush. And we're just going to start to get this thing working in. The initial application, it can be really big and thick and globby, and it doesn't matter. Think of this as analogous to applying wax on a real car. When you initially apply that wax, you really go to town with it. You just sort of glom it on there. And, I mean, obviously not too extreme, but you just sort of glob this on, and it's going to look absolutely horrible. And that's exactly what you want. You want this to be obvious. You want it all over all of your painted surfaces. and you want it just to sit on top of the paint. It's going to look terrible, but because it looks terrible, you'll know exactly where you've applied it, which means you know exactly where you're going to take it off later on. So that's fine. It's going to go all over the car, all the painted surfaces. So all of that is fine. Some more on the door, some more on the roof. If you get a little bit of over application into the plastic areas like the windshield and all of that, that's okay. Again, this is not going to harm plastic surfaces. I mean, remember, this is made for furniture, generally wood furniture with a sealant on it, and the sealant on wood furniture also tends to be petroleum paste. So you've got a petroleum product on top of a petroleum product, which generally speaking, my chemists out there will say like dissolves like. You can't possibly do that, but we're going to take it off. We're not going to let it sit there for a very long time. All we want to do is get a little bit of a surface shine on this. So we're getting this applied all over, and then we're going to take it off reasonably soon. So that's not a big deal. We're going to flip it around to the rear so we can see more of what we're doing. You can see how fogged up the rear glass is now. That's just the polish sitting on top. But yeah, I'm getting this all over in the plastic areas as well, the transparent plastic areas. It's okay. It's not going to really harm anything, as long as you don't use too much force on the plastic when you take it off. It's going to be okay. Going to get it on the wheels too as the chimes of Westminster go off on the clock behind us. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to jump cut here because it's coming up to 11, and it's going to go 11 times. But anyway, as I was saying, yes, just getting the last bits applied here to the rear. You can get it into the wheels. It's not going to hurt anything. It's fine to use this on rubber as well. Again, it's just cheap, normal grade furniture polish that you'll get at any store ever, even during the midst of a global pandemic. So, no issues with any of this. Let's finish getting it into the areas that we want on the front end. Oh, that is just marvelous. Getting that in. The only thing that you want to watch out for is when you put the polish on these makeup brushes, it tends to make the bristles stiff, and they'll stay in whatever position you last pressed them into. So be careful that you don't start to get into the wire binding that's holding these bristles in place, because that is going to damage something. So just keep an eye out for that. But as long as you don't do that, this is going to be completely safe and fine for your painted surfaces and your plastic surfaces as well. So we've got our car all applied here with the polish, and you can see that it looks absolutely horrible right now, and that is entirely by design. It's all cloudy and terrible and disgusting, but just like when you wax a real car, it looks terrible and cloudy and disgusting, and then you start buffing it, and then it all changes for the better. So that's what we're going to be doing here. We're going to let this sit for a couple more minutes. I'm going to say like 2 or 3 minutes. It doesn't have to sit long. And remember, this is an oil-based thing, so it just kind of never dries. So that's what we're going to do. And we'll be back in about 2-3 minutes, and that's when we're going to start buffing this thing. Okay, so we have let this sit for a couple more minutes, and you can see that it's pretty much at the state now where we can start to take it off. And the whole car is just absolutely coated in the stuff as we wanted. So now the final bit is just going to be to start buffing, and for this we use our handy microfiber cloth. So you don't need to use the whole surface of the cloth all the time. Just sort of wad it up at the end here, and obviously you want your gloves on at this point. And just like you would on a real car, you would just start to buff it in little circles. Don't use a lot of pressure, and always check to see if you're removing any paint. With a polish like this, you're not really going to, but you never know if you're going to have a surface that's going to react weird. If you want to do a spot test on something, if you're not sure if it's going to react weird, go ahead and do that. But I've been doing this on my cars for a while, and I know that this car is going to be fine because I've cleaned other cars of similar colors by the same manufacturer, made around the same time, so I know that this paint's going to be safe. Be careful around the decals there, the Ferrari logo, in case anything got unstuck, but it's okay, no problem. And you just sort of buff at it. Again, little circles, just like you would on a real car. So I'm just going to do the front end here, and I'll show you what it looks like once we are kind of buffed up here. Do the other fender now. Get around to this area on this side. Get into the air ducts along the front there. All really complicated geometries on the Enzo. And LaFerrari's even worse, but not so bad. Not so bad at all. You're going to get little swirls in there. And you could repeat this with a dry area of the cloth if you want to get rid of those. But there it is. There's a little bit of hazing that you can see. But that's how it's going to start to shine up across the whole thing. And it's going to look really good when it's done. I'll take a dry area of the cloth, or an unsoiled area, because everything is dry at this point, and I'll just buff a little bit more in the same areas, just to see if I can rectify a little bit of that hazing. It's not really gonna be rectified because, again, this is not automotive quality paint, so it doesn't have the same sort of, first of all, it's not the same sort of paint, but it's not going to have the same sort of clear coat, and it certainly doesn't have nearly as many layers as most automotive paint jobs do, so it's not going to shine up in quite the same way. But you can get a pretty nice luster out of these because, again, they are made of metal, and metal has a general luster to it. So there you go. Doesn't look so bad. And that hazing is going to remain to an extent because it's just an artifact of the way the paint is on the car. But it looks all right. And yeah, I think that's acceptable. And we're just going to continue to do this along the entire length of the car, everywhere that the polish is sitting. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to take another end of the cloth, and we're just going to do the same. We're just going to start buffing the polish up and out of it. And even to an extent on the windscreen, because we did get polish there. And the windows as well. Use a whole lot less pressure there than on the metal surfaces. But, you know, it's hard to do it in little circles along straight edges, obviously, but you just sort of do the best you can. And where you get into the really complicated geometries around the door sills here, you just sort of make do with what you can get away with. But for the most part, that's shining up pretty nice. It's not so bad. Not bad for something that's, how old is this by now? My God, 16, 17 years I've had this about. So yeah, this is pretty old at this point. But it still shines up pretty nice. Along the 3/4 panel area now. This part is die cast down here. This is plastic. So right above the shut line is plastic. But as you can see, coming along the die cast surfaces, focus, thank you. Get along the die cast surfaces, and everything is just starting to shine up nicely. So that's what you want to see when you take this off. No issues with any of this. Even the plastic, the brake lights here, they're fine. I know this is absolutely enthralling to watch. The only more interesting thing is probably watching paint dry. But yeah, let's get that in there. That looks alright. I've got to say, that looks okay. I just noticed that there's a gigantic yoga ball in the background. I knew it was there, obviously, and I didn't think about it. So yes, there's a yoga ball in the background. So I'm sure you're all wondering, what the hell else does this guy do with his spare time? I promise you that yoga ball is not for my use. Not that I have anything against doing yoga or people who partake in yoga. It's very, very useful, valuable. Chimes of Westminster on the quarter hour. But it's just not my thing. Meditation, yes. Meditation is very much something that I do, and definitely would recommend to anybody who is interested. But yoga, I'm not into that part of it. Let's see. So this is working. This is working pretty nicely. This is starting to shape up just as I had hoped. No problems. The only areas that we haven't done yet really is the engine cover and the little window on the engine cover. And you can see a marked difference in the reflections from the die-cast areas, particularly on the roof and the front. I could do a better job on the roof yet. And then the entire engine cover still needs to be done, which we will do presently. So I will do. How are we gonna light this? Where do we want the car here? Okay, this is good enough. It puts me at a weird angle in terms of having to access it, but sacrifices must be made for filmmaking, ladies and gentlemen, or mostly gentlemen. And as I said in another somewhat recent video, there are two ladies that watch this channel. Neither of one I know personally, but you know. Such is life. Anyway, now this is plastic on the engine cover, so I am trying to be a little bit more cautious. Again, only because it's thinner. I'm not worried about the finish being damaged by the polish, but it's thinner, so I can't quite use as much force, which makes it a little bit difficult to buff. But you just sort of, again, see what you can get away with. And that's fine. Little bits of surface dust. I don't know if you can see it. There's just a little bit of dust on the brake light. That's gone now. And also the gloves that I'm wearing, they have almost a suede finish, particularly on the grip. And these are the same gloves I use for sim racing as well. And they're actually pretty comfortable. They are not FIA certified. They're SFI certified Nomex gloves. They are fire resistant. So if they're fire resistant, they're also scratch resistant, I would assume. And they work pretty well for this. So that's fine. And here's where imperfections in the paint really start to show up. And there's not a whole lot that you can do about that. Like there is one here right on the door sill. Not the door sill, but you know what I mean. This little dorsal fin area on the door. Can you even see it from this angle? Yeah, maybe if I point it out to you right there is where it is. Yeah, you could just make that out. But little paint imperfection, looks like a little bit of paint loss. Short of trying to get some sort of enamel paint set and painstakingly color match and try to apply that with the absolute smallest sharp tip brush that I could ever find, there's nothing I'm going to do about that. There's a little bit more paint loss along this sill as well than the lower part of the door. But again, this model is 17 years old. So you're going to find things like that, and it's part of the character. These earlier cars that I have in the collection, they were toys, really. Obviously, I took a lot of care of them when I was younger, but they were toys. The original boxes are long gone, and they just sit out in the open on a shelf, which is how this one got to be so dusty. But you know, little things like that, little chinks in the armor, they show, in my opinion, that they were enjoyed. which, especially on one like this, it's a Mattel. It's not something like a BBR or a CMC, something that, you know, is really heirloom type quality. It's not what this is. This was mainly marketed as a toy for the most part, and that's how it was used. So I'm okay with that. And obviously, with the state of the car when we started, it hadn't really been handled for, again, I would guess, about 10 years. So it was just sitting on that shelf all that time, collecting the dust, which now we have gotten off. And we have really shined this thing up to a standard that I think is passable. There are a couple things I want to point out. First of all, yep, there is a little bit of paint loss there in the door sill. The lower and upper body lines there, but that's all right. The other area that I want to point out is right here in the engine cover. You can see this fogging. This is actually water evaporating. Remember when we clean out the engine bay? That's just a little bit of fogging in there as that water evaporates. I can get the little towel in there and just wipe that up, and then you can see it's gone. So we have that going for us. Also, in the air inlet here on this side, there is a little bit of gunk in there, some polish and some dust that we had missed. So we could just get in there with our cloth as best we can and just try to lift some of that out. I think we got a lot of it. Hard to tell, hard to get the light in there. There's still a little bit more. Yeah, a little bit more in there. I'm going to have to use some more attention to get that. And here's where, if you do have openable bodywork, it obviously makes it a little bit easier to get into some of these areas, because now there's a little bit more space up top for me to get this in. But that's okay. Probably can't see much because the cloth is blocking the view, but I'm just trying to get the cloth in there and get it out. I'm not at all surprised if the same thing is true on the other side, and it is. Just trying to get that out as best we can. And you can see practically nothing at this moment. My apologies. I'm not a filmmaker, I just play one on the internet. Almost. Let me get this open again. So we get it from the top down. Got a lot of it. Didn't get all of it, but got a lot of it. Left side is still a little bit worse, in my humble opinion. Is it humble? I don't know, but it's an opinion. Get that in there. Whatever. And that's about as good as it's gonna get. I don't, you could get a little bit crazy with these in terms of, oh wait, I see a little spot here, a little spot there, whatever, but at some point you gotta call it quits and just accept that it's as good as it's ever gonna get. And I think we have almost reached that point. There is a little bit of water on the inside of the windscreen that I want to try to get. Right, probably see it from this angle. It's roughly in the center, so going from either side, I think, is going to be habile here. Just trying to get this in, and it's a terrible angle with just the way the door opens, but I can try to feed this through. If I get it to snap upward, which I don't think I'm going to be able to do at this point, but I don't know, if we just keep shoving it in there, maybe it'll just hit something and get bounced up. I don't think it's going to work. No. Get my brush in there again. It's still a little bit damp. I cleaned this up before. It's better than it was. I did wash the brush out with dish soap just to get the polish out of there, because again, it's a petroleum-based thing. So on the like dissolves like principle, the dish soap will take care of that. And then you just dry the brush off as best you can and let it air dry the rest, which is going to be absolutely marvelous. Yeah, this little dust spot there. And I think we're pretty much done. I see no more issues that I could rectify with the tools on hand. A little bit of dust in the intake there on the right side. Get that out as best as we can. Oh, I'm blocking your view again, sorry. Alright. That'll be fine. Just get the water out of that. And that'll be good to go. And that, my beloved audience here, I think that is a cleaned up Mattel Ferrari Enzo. Compared to what it started with, I think that's pretty nicely improved. I mean, it's actually red now, which is alright. As I mentioned before with the sealing around the lights, not much I could do about that. Got some polish residue in there. That'll just sort of resolve itself after a while. Same on this side, got a little bit in there, but the left side light is worse in terms of the seal that it has relative to the body. But the rest of it looks pretty well okay. And, you know, for something that's just going to go straight back and sit on the shelf again, it looks pretty nice. And, you know, there are little bits of paint imperfections in this area here. You can see where we've got a little bit of orange peel going on and all of that good stuff. But what do you want? It's a 17-year-old, $30 model car. And for that, I think it looks all right. Really does. I don't know. I know that actually that there was an Enzo done by BBR more recently, which looks tremendous. It's got all the opening features, got some luggage that comes with it. Looks amazing. Unfortunately, it also sells for like $700, and it's not made anymore either, so probably never going to get that one. But this is all right. It is my Enzo. And it now looks like it hasn't been neglected for 10 years, even though it has been. So there it is. I hope that this was somewhat informative for some of you who are just getting into this hobby. Again, this is how I do it, and it's how I do it on models that are fairly robust. I mean, this thing has no damage. It's made pretty well. It's mostly one-piece construction in terms of die cast. Got some extensive plastic on it, but I know what paint I'm dealing with. I know what sorts of glues I'm dealing with here on these Mattels. It's going to hold up to most normal sorts of cleaning methods. So that's how I do it on the cars that I'm not worried about in terms of their integrity. For others, for things like Exodo, for CMC, things that have a lot of intricate individual parts, this is not an approach you want to use. I wouldn't use water on one of those because those parts are held in individually by glue joints, or they're held in under spring tension in some cases, and it's just a completely different thing. Those are things that you want to look at compressed air cleaning, or really just very, very, very fine paint brushes, dry paint brushes to get things in there, just to get the dust out. But for those, keep them in their boxes. There's a reason why they come with those really nice boxes. Keep them, and keep the cars in them, if at all possible. Same thing with my open wheel cars, the Formula One cars, the Indy cars. They're in the boxes, and they're in the boxes because trying to clean those with all of those intricate surfaces and whatever just wouldn't work. And again, I wouldn't want to use water on them because even though some of those are actually Mattels, the same manufacturer as this, they have so many more individual parts that are glued in or just held in under their own tension that throwing a brush around in there is probably just going to pop something loose, and that's really hard to fix. So again, those are best suited for either compressed air or just generally keep them in the box and don't let them get too dirty. But that's all I've got for us today. Hope this was interesting and informative to you. If you have any observations or anything that you do to clean your models or any other similar items, please do let us know in the comments. Until next time, though, I do thank you all very much for watching. Ferrari Man 601 saying thanks, and of course, we will see you soon.